What's up, YouTube? It's Chris with Murphy Firearms Training. I have got two guns here. One is actually new in the box. This is a gun I have in inventory, and I wanted to compare it to a gun that I've had for a while. This is the Ruger LCP 2. It does have the Viridian green laser. It is unloaded. This is the Ruger LCP, and this is the LCP Custom. Now, the only difference between the LCP-1 and the LCP Custom is the LCP Custom came with taller sights, okay, and these are actually interchangeable. They're bolted to the slide, and it came with this anodized red aluminum trigger. This model has been discontinued. They don't sell it anymore. They do still sell the LCP-1. Now, one of the biggest knocks I have on the LCP-1 is it does not lock open on an empty magazine, whereas the LCP2 does lock open on an empty magazine. So one thing to keep in mind there, this doesn't lock open on an empty magazine. You do have to activate the lever here, okay? Whereas the LCP2, A, has a better lever to activate, and then B, doesn't have to be activated. It actually will lock itself open. So it's easier to activate lever. So that's the first thing. The grip texturings are totally different on these two guns. Dimension-wise, I'm going to stack them one on top of the other. You see the back end is cut slightly different. So it's a more of a slope on the LCP-1 versus the LCP-2 is a little squarer on the back end. Height is pretty much identical on these two guns from the bottom of the grip to the top of the slide. Trigger reach is pretty much identical. Trigger guard's pretty much identical. Again, the profile here is a little squarer at the nose, but in general, very, very similar. These do have the blade trigger safeties. These do not. I'm going to get the trigger pull gauge out in a second. The magazine releases are very similar. One of the things I've read, I've never tried it, but it's talking about magazine interchangeability. The LCP2 mag will go into the LCP1. Will the LCP1 mag go into the LCP2? Looks like it will. Okay. Somewhere I had read one time that the LCP1 mags would not work with the LCP2. This is an LCP1 factory Ruger mag, came with this gun, so I don't know. Maybe it's earlier generation magazines. Speaking of the magazines, I mean, other than this extra texturing you get on the LCP2 versus this little cupping that you get here to remove your mag, pretty much identical magazines. Got the little pinky plate, all of that. So both 6-round capacity. So you can see this still has the sticker on it because, as again, this is a brand new gun. So not going to worry about the laser there. The sights on this one is removable. And that's true of the Custom, not the LCP1. So since they don't make this model anymore, I don't think that's fair. This is an integral sight built into the rear of the slide, built into the front of the slide, which is the same as the LCP1. So if you're comparing this to a true LCP1. So what's the differences? The grip texture is very different. The roundness of the trigger guard, the trigger blade is different. The last round hold open is different on this one. The big difference, I think, for these guns is the trigger. And so I am going to... So this is a traditional kind of a double action style trigger, and I'll show you. Here's your hammer, and this is sitting on a locking device that will not allow this hammer to go forward. You can't push this hammer forward without pulling the trigger, and you have to finish tensioning the trigger. There's a big spring in the mag well. You finish tensioning the trigger, and then click, okay? And it partially resets, and then you... And it's quite a heavy, quite a long trigger. Not quite as bad as a double action revolver, but it is quite heavy. Okay. The LCP2 is pre-tensioned. It's more like a striker fired gun. It is pre-tensioned. You'll see that the hammer is pretty much all the way back, and you just break the connection, very similar to a striker fired gun. So there's a wall. The hammer's all the way back, pre-tensioned by the slide, and it breaks. So it's just a wall and a crisp break versus a building spring tension like you would get for a revolver trigger. So what I've got here, folks, I've got my trigger pull gauge, and I'm going to reset both of these. I'm going to do 3 trigger pulls with each gun. quite heavy, quite heavy. I'm getting 8 pounds, 4.7 ounces. Let's do another one to retention. There we go. Let's do another one. Grip it. Put the trigger gauge on the screen. 7 pounds, 14.5 ounces. And let's do one more. All right, loop it and pull it. That's not going. Apparently, I didn't activate the. Let's try that again. Got to make sure we hook the trigger bar there. Okay, so 7 pounds, 15 ounces. So we're coming in right around 8 pounds. So it's still a very heavy trigger, but it is literally, you hit the wall. It's all just slack. You hit the wall, very much like a Glock trigger, striker-fired trigger. Heavier than a typical striker-fired trigger, and you just keep squeezing, and it breaks and hits your over travel and releases the hammer. It is a hammer-fired gun. I mean, there is a hammer in there. It is a hammer-fired gun. You'll see that hammer snap forward. Okay, it is a hammer-fired gun, but it is a more of a striker-fired, very short, crisp, albeit heavy trigger. The LCP2 is that longer, it's a smoother trigger in my opinion. The LCP1 is a smoother trigger in my opinion, but, so we'll loop that, and we'll pull this forward, and we'll take a look-see here. Okay, shows 6 pounds, 10 ounces, give or take a hair there. Let's reset that again. All right, hook it, pull it. 6 pounds, 9.2 ounces. So ironically, everybody hates the LCP1 trigger. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. But it looks to be about a pound lighter than the LCP2 trigger. So that's very interesting to me. But it is a different trigger pull. I mean, they're two very different trigger pulls. And so, you know, it kind of depends on what you like and what you enjoy. I don't mind the long, heavy trigger pull on this one because I shoot revolvers a lot. But if that bothers you, the LCP2 may be a better option. The Viridian laser is kind of cool because at least for my hand, my finger rests almost. As a matter of fact, if you had a shorter hand, I think it's made for a smaller hand, like females. But if you know, your finger rests right there and you get this Viridian laser, and it doesn't show up as well on camera. It doesn't show up as well on the wood on camera as it does in real life, but it's quite bright, really cool, and it is ambidextrous, and so it's just touch on, touch off, so touch on, touch off. So kind of a cool feature you can get from the factory with this, quite bright in daylight. But the LCP2 versus the LCP1, the real big difference, like I said, if you had a standard LCP1, the sights will be milled the same. The slide serrations are very similar, not quite the same, but very similar. The grip textures are a little different, but not enough to really matter much. The shapes of the pistols are slightly different, but again, not a lot. The big difference between these two is the trigger. This is that short, crisp, although heavy, and this is that long, heavy revolver type trigger that you really have to add a lot of muscle to over a length of time. That's the big difference. So anyway, and if you can find one, the LCP1 Custom does have bigger sights that are removable. And I have a video showing how I did it, but this is actually a Glock 19 night sight that I put on my Ruger LCP Custom so that when I am forced to pocket carry and it is night, I do have a night sight and I can pick that up if I need to in low light, which I think is very, very important. So anyway, LCP1 versus LCP2. I hope that helps, guys. I appreciate your support. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments or shoot us an email. Please like and subscribe, and we appreciate it.